The first thing I did, after reincarnating as a bull, was to frantically grab 200 jin of hay and eat myself into becoming the strongest bull in the pen. All the surrounding calves thought I was crazy. You see, the bigger you grow, not only are you more likely to be slaughtered, but you're also more likely to be quickly taken to plow fields and do hard labor. That's even worse than death. However, what they didn't know was I had awakened the devouring evolver. As long as I eat, I can continuously get stronger, although eating hay improved me very slowly. Fortunately, it was safe enough. I originally thought I could smoothly reach 3,000 jin, and thus evolve. Unexpectedly, the appearance of 2 humans disrupted my plan. Daddy, don't kill Ziohai. He's a good boy. Little girl was pulling the strong man's hand, constantly pouting. Her red, teary eyes occasionally drifted towards me, but the strong man's expression remained unchanged. Duo, isn't braised beef delicious? Delicious? Yes. But before the little girl could finish, the strong man stroked her head and said, "Don't worry, his slaughter has already been arranged with the meat market. We'll sell him off when it's closer to New Year." After hearing their conversation, I instantly felt the hay in my mouth was no longer delicious. Fortunately, it was still a long time until New Year. As long as I could evolve before then, there would definitely be a way to escape this cattle farm. For these 2 months, I frantically sped up my eating. Whether it was dry stalks or coarse scraps, I shoved them all into my mouth. However, the results were not ideal. Species: ice-type domestic cattle. Current weight: 800 jin. Constitution: 15. Strength: 20. Having always eaten low-energy food, my various attributes had not improved significantly. Although compared to other domestic cattle, I was already a behemoth, but to contend with humans, I was completely unqualified. Just as I was thinking this, the strong man, along with a few other men, came before me again. Seeing that I had grown another size bigger, his eyes lit up with joy. "Lads, give me a hand. Let's get my big black bull loaded up properly. After this, I'll treat everyone to a good meal." Despite my desperate struggles, I was still firmly pulled by my horns and dragged out of the cattle farm. Looking at the large truck with an iron cage in front of me, my heart sank. With a regular small truck, I could still try to overturn it and escape, but this kind of truck with an iron cage completely shattered my hopes. However, when I was loaded into the truck, I discovered they hadn't locked the iron cage. Instead, they secured it with a single bolt. This was undoubtedly my last hope of escape. The truck started. The truck began to violently bump. I stared intently at that bolt. If I could just ram it open, I could live. But the strong man was sitting in the driver's cab, glancing at me through the rearview mirror from time to time. I dared not make any rash moves. The truck drove onto a mountain road. The bumping became even more intense. While the strong man was focused on driving, I quietly used my horns to push against the bolt, pushing it outwards little by little. However, just as the bolt was about to loosen, the strong man suddenly slammed on the brakes. "Damn it! You driving blind." Through the gaps in the iron cage, I saw a car blocking the middle of the road. 3 thin, wiry men got out of the car. The leader had a cigarette dangling from his mouth. There was a scar on his face. "Boss Lai, long time no see." The scar-faced man walked to the side of the driver's cab, smiling sinisterly. The strong man's expression changed. "Old Dao, what do you want?" "Oh, nothing much. I just heard you raised a good bull and wanted to take a look," old Dao said, walking towards the back of the truck. I immediately pretended to be docile, lying down in the cage. Tusk. This bull is really strong, at least 800 jin. Right. Old Dao reached out and patted the iron cage, his eyes gleaming with greed. The strong man quickly got out of the car. "Old Dao, I've already sold this bull to the meat market. Don't you dare get any ideas." "Sold to the meat market? What a waste." Old Dao extinguished his cigarette, leaned closer to the strong man's ear, and whispered a few words. The strong man's expression grew increasingly grim. Finally, he gritted his teeth and said, "Deal, but you'll have to pay more." My heart sank. These 2 humans were actually making a deal right in front of me. However, just at this moment, old Dao suddenly pointed at the bolt and said, "Boss Lai, why isn't your cage locked?" The strong man froze for a moment, just about to speak, and I suddenly used all my strength to ram fiercely into the bolt. With a snap, the bolt broke. The iron cage door sprang open violently. I rushed out of the cage, leaped directly off the truck. "Damn it, you ran away again." Old Dao's angry roar came from behind me, but I had already rushed into the dense forest by the roadside. I desperately ran wildly towards the depths of the dense forest. From behind, I heard the strong man and old Dao cursing and shouting. "Quick, chase this bull. It cost me 30,000 yuan." Old Dao's voice was getting closer and closer. My 4 legs ran extremely fast. Tree branches scraped against my body, causing a burning pain. However, after running for not long, I felt my stamina beginning to fail. Damn it, 2 months of eating hay simply hadn't accumulated enough energy. Just as I was about to give out, a strong smell of blood suddenly came from ahead. I followed the smell and ran. I actually discovered a dead wild boar lying in the bushes. It looked like it hadn't been dead for long. I panted heavily, staring at the wild boar's corpse. My mind raced frantically. The system prompted that I could get stronger by eating, but it never said I could only eat hay. The footsteps behind me were getting closer and closer. I no longer had time to hesitate. What the hell? I'd treat a dead horse as if it were alive. I lowered my head, opened my mouth, and bit into the wild boar's flesh. I fiercely tore off a large piece and shoved it into my mouth. The bloody smell instantly filled my mouth. I forced myself to endure the nausea and swallowed it. However, the next second, the system's prompt sounds rang out frantically. Devoured wild boar flesh. Gained 50 high energy points. Constitution increased by 5 points. Strength increased by 8 points. Weight increased by 100 jin. I was stunned. One mouthful of meat was actually more effective than eating hay for a month. There was no time to think further. I frantically bit into the wild boar, stuffing large mouthfuls into my stomach. With each mouthful swallowed, a surge of burning power erupted within my body. My muscles were frantically expanding. Over there, old Dao's voice exploded from behind me. I sharply turned my head and saw 3 men rushing towards me, carrying hunting rifles. The strong man followed behind, his face ashen. "Old Dao, don't shoot. If you damage the meat, it won't be worth anything." "Worth a damn. This beast ran away. I'll have to pay 30,000 yuan. Old Dao raised his hunting rifle, and the dark muzzle was aimed at me. My heart tightened. I immediately picked up the remaining half of the wild boar with my mouth, turned, and ran. With a bang, a gunshot rang out. The bullet grazed my hind leg as it flew past, kicking up a patch of dirt on the ground. I ran even faster. My mouth was firmly clenched onto the wild boar's corpse, not letting go. This was my lifeline. I absolutely couldn't lose it. After running for another 10-odd minutes, I finally shook off old Dao and his men. I hid in a cave and put down the wild boar. I panted heavily. The system's prompt sound rang out again. Current weight, 900 jin. Constitution, 32. Strength, 45. Detected host continuously devouring high-energy flesh and blood. Body beginning to produce mutation reaction. Mutation. I lowered my head to look at my body and discovered that my skin's surface actually began to show a faint layer of black keratin. Furthermore, my 4 legs were noticeably thicker and sturdier. My muscle lines were clearly visible. I tried using my hooves to paw at the ground. The hard stone was actually easily dug by me, creating a pit. This strength was more than double what it was before. I excitedly continued to gnaw on the wild boar carcass. Soon, I devoured all the remaining parts. Ding! Having fully devoured the wild boar, my weight exceeded 1,000 katas. My strength surpassed 50 points. My body's mutation accelerated. My skin's hardening degree increased by 30%. I felt my whole body filled with power. The feeling of weakness from before was completely gone. However, just then, a burst of dog barking suddenly came from outside the cave. My heart sank. Old Dao actually brought hunting dogs to chase me. Sure enough, not long after, 3 fierce hunting dogs rushed into the cave. They bared their fangs and snarled as they pounced at me. The lead hunting dog was enormous. It was over 1 meter tall. Its eyes glowed with a fierce light. "Tear him apart," old Dao's voice rang out from outside the cave. The 3 hunting dogs simultaneously pounced at me, their sharp fangs aimed straight for my throat. However, this time I did not run. I let out a low roar. I suddenly lifted my front hooves and fiercely kicked the lead hunting dog. With a bang, the lead hunting dog screamed as it flew backward. It crashed into the cave wall and died instantly. The other 2 hunting dogs froze. A flicker of fear flashed in their eyes, but I was already seeing red. I charged forward and fiercely gored the second hunting dog's chest with my horns. The 3rd hunting dog was terrified and turned to flee, but I stomped on it with a hoof, breaking its spine. Old Dao's terrified voice came from outside the cave. "Is this beast still a bull?" When I looked at the 3 hunting dog carcasses on the ground, a crazy thought suddenly popped into my head. If eating wild boar can make me stronger, then what about eating hunting dogs? I lowered my head and bit into the largest lead hunting dog, fiercely tearing off a large chunk of flesh and stuffing it into my mouth. Ding! Devoured mutated hunting dog flesh. Gained 80 high energy points. Strength increased by 12 points. Constitution increased by 10 points. Agility increased by 5 points. My eyes lit up. The energy from these hunting dogs was actually higher than that of the wild boar. I sped up, frantically devouring the carcasses of the 3 hunting dogs. Devour complete. Current weight, 1,200 katas. Strength, 78. Constitution, 65. Agility, 30. Detected that host's constitution has reached the mutation critical point. Body beginning deep mutation. No sooner had the voice fallen, my entire body's skin began to burn intensely. It felt like countless ants were gnawing on me. I rolled on the ground in pain, but gritted my teeth and endured, not crying out. After about 10 minutes, the burning sensation finally receded. I struggled to stand up and looked down at my body. The entire bull was stunned. On the surface of my skin, a layer of black bone had actually grown. The keratinous layer felt incredibly hard to the touch. It was like wearing a layer of armor. Moreover, on my back, 7 or 8 sharp bone spikes had actually emerged. Each one was half a kai long. They gleamed with a cold light in the dim cave. I tried shaking my head and found that my horns had also grown thicker by a circle. Their tips were as sharp as 2 daggers. While I was still in shock, old Dao's voice suddenly came from outside the cave. "Boss Lai, are you sure that beast is inside?" I saw it go in with my own eyes. It definitely can't escape. The strong man's voice was trembling. Clearly, he was badly frightened by the previous scene. "All right. Then don't blame me for being ruthless. This beast killed my 3 hunting dogs. It must die today. After old Dao finished speaking, I heard a rustling sound, as if something was being prepared. I stared warily at the cave entrance, my muscles tense. However, the next second, something sparking was thrown in. Its dynamite, my pupils contracted. I immediately turned and ran deeper into the cave. With a deafening boom, the entire cave shook violently. Debris rained down like raindrops. I was thrown to the ground by the blast wave. My back was hit by several sharp rocks, but I only felt a slight pain. That layer of bony armor had actually blocked most of the damage for me. I struggled to get up and found that the cave entrance had been mostly blown in. Is it dead? Old Dao's voice came from outside. It should be dead. With such power, even a bear would be finished. The strong man breathed a sigh of relief, listening to their conversation. A fierce glint flashed in my eyes. You want to blow me up? Dream on, I roared fiercely. I suddenly charged towards the half-collapsed cave entrance. The rubble and earth couldn't stop me at all. I forcefully smashed through the debris and burst out of the cave. The sunlight stung my eyes, making me squint. When I finally saw clearly what was outside, old Dao and the strong man were already pale with fright. THTH, what kind of monster is this? Old Dao looked at the bone spikes and armor on my body. The hunting rifle in his hand was shaking uncontrollably. The strong man, moreover, directly collapsed onto the ground, his crotch soaked. I shook the dust from my head and walked step by step towards the 2 men. Old Dao reacted, raised his hunting rifle, and fired at me. All 3 bullets hit my armor, but only sparked a few times. Not even my skin was broken. Old Dao completely panicked, threw down his rifle, and turned to run. Old Dao, don't leave me. The strong man scrambled up, wanting to follow and run, but his legs were weak with fear. He stumbled and fell to the ground. I walked up to the strong man, looking down at him. This man had raised me for 2 months. Although it was to sell me for money, at least he hadn't abused me. I stared at him for a few seconds, and finally turned to chase in the direction old Dao had fled. This bastard tried to blow me up, and now he wants to run. I exerted myself. My speed was astonishing. In a few breaths, I caught up to old Dao. Old Dao looked back and saw me. Scared out of his wits, he lost his footing and rolled directly down the hillside. I stood at the top of the slope, watching old Dao struggle and wail in the thorny bushes. I didn't pursue him further. The system prompt suddenly rang out. Host has completed first counterkill. Achieved human pursuit. Breaking the shackles. Body mutation stabilized. Officially evolved into an armored brute bull. New mission activated. Delve into the wilderness. Devour stronger creatures and break through 2,000 katas in weight. I looked up at the distant, continuous deep mountains. A glint of excitement flashed in my eyes. I couldn't go back to the human world, and I would eat my way to survival in this wilderness. I turned and left the hillside, walking deeper into the dense forest without looking back. The strong man's shouts came from behind me, but I was too lazy to pay attention. The system prompt rang out again. Current status: Armored Brute Bull. Weight: 1,200 katas. Strength: 78. Constitution: 65. Agility: 30. Evolved to 2,000 katas to unlock new form. Host is advised to seek higher energy prey. I flicked my tail and quickened my pace, heading deeper into the mountains and forest. Since I was going to get stronger, I had to find even more formidable prey. After walking for about an hour, the surrounding trees became denser and denser. Sunlight barely penetrated. The air was filled with a damp, putrid smell. The ground was covered with animal droppings and remains. I cautiously pricked up my ears. This place was clearly the territory of some large beast. Just then, the bushes ahead suddenly rustled. I immediately stopped. My muscles tensed. A giant wild boar charged out of the bushes. Its tusks were a full kai long. Its eyes were blood red. This wild boar was a full circle larger than the one I had eaten before. It weighed at least 400 or 500 katas. The wild boar saw me and let out an angry roar, pawing the ground. It was about to charge. I did not flinch. Instead, I actively met it. The 2 of us, however, slammed violently into each other. A dull thud echoed. The wild boar's tusks pierced my armor, but only left 2 shallow scratches. I seized the opportunity, lowered my head, and brutally gored it with my horns. The wild boar let out a pained squeal. Blood gushed out. I forcefully shook my head and directly flung the wild boar to the ground. The wild boar struggled, trying to get up, but I broke its neck with a single hoof. Ding! Killed a large wild boar. Gained 120 high energy points. I didn't hesitate to start devouring the wild boar's corpse. The warm flesh entered my mouth. That familiar burning sensation surged through my body once more. Weight increased by 150 jin. Strength increased by 15 points. Constitution increased by 12 points. Current weight: 1,350 jin. 650 jin still needed for evolution. I was eating with gusto. Suddenly, rustling sounds came from all around. I sharply raised my head. I found myself surrounded by 7, 8 pairs of glowing green eyes. It was a wolf pack. The lead wolf was exceptionally massive. Its fur was grayish-black. Its eyes were fierce, and drool hung from its mouth. The other wolves fanned out, slowly closing in, forming a circle. I swallowed the meat in my mouth. Roaring, I took a battle stance. The wolf pack clearly saw me as an intruder, and I had stolen their prey. The lead wolf howled. The other wolves immediately pounced from all directions. I spun around sharply and used a hind kick to fiercely kick away a wolf that was pouncing on my hind leg. Another wolf bit my neck, but its teeth shattered against my armor. It yelped and let go. I seized the chance to impale that wolf with my horns and slammed it hard onto the ground. However, the wolf pack's coordination was incredibly seamless. As soon as one wolf was repelled, another immediately took its place. My stamina began to deplete. My breathing also became rapid. Just then, the lead wolf suddenly pounced from the side. Its sharp claws aimed directly for my eyes. Too late to dodge. I could only tilt my head. Slashing with my horns, the lead wolf's claws raked across my cheek, tearing open a gash. Blood instantly gushed out. I roared in pain, completely enraged. To hell with the wolf pack. Today, it's either you die or I die. I exerted force fiercely and brutally slammed the lead wolf with the bone spikes on my back. The lead wolf reacted extremely quickly, flipping in midair to dodge. However, a wolf behind it wasn't so lucky. The bone spikes directly pierced its body, killing it instantly. The other wolves saw their companion's gruesome death. A flicker of fear flashed in their eyes. Their offensive clearly weakened. I seized the chance to charge at the nearest wolf and crushed its head with a single hoof. Seeing the situation was unfavorable, the lead wolf let out a long howl and quickly retreated with the remaining pack. I stood there, panting heavily, covered in blood, unable to tell if it was my own or the wolves'. Ding. Killed 3 wild wolves. Gained 180 high energy points. Detected host injury. Recommend immediately devouring flesh to restore stamina. I looked at the 2 wolf corpses on the ground and the unfinished wild boar. I didn't hesitate to start eating. As the flesh entered my mouth, a tingling sensation came from my wounds. They were actually healing at a visible rate. Weight surpassed 1,500. Strength surpassed 100 points. Armor hardness increased. Bone spike length increased. I felt my body filled with power. The fatigue from earlier was completely swept away. However, just then, wolf howls came from afar once more, and their numbers were more than double what they were before. My heart sank. These beasts actually called for backup. I can't stay here long. I need to find a safe place quickly. I picked up the remaining half of the wild boar and turned to run deep into the dense forest. The wolf howls behind me grew closer and closer. This time, they were truly desperate to fight me to the death. I ran frantically, carrying the wild boar corpse in my mouth. The wolf howls behind me were like shadows. Following closely, through the gaps in the trees, I saw at least a dozen wolves chasing me. The one in the lead was precisely that same wolf from before. This beast truly holds a grudge. I galloped on all fours, branches constantly snagged on my body. My armor scraped, making a harsh sound. However, the wolf pack's speed was even greater. The distance was constantly shrinking. Just as I was about to be caught, an open area suddenly appeared ahead. I burst out of the forest and found that it was actually a rocky beach. Huge rocks were scattered about, with a small stream running through the middle. I didn't have time to think and charged directly into the rocks. The wolf pack followed closely behind. A dozen wolves surrounded me from all directions, completely blocked my escape route. The lead wolf stood on a large rock, staring down at me, its eyes filled with malice. It let out a long howl. Looking up at the sky, the wolf pack immediately launched their attack. This time, they had learned their lesson, no longer fighting alone, but attacking in coordinated groups of 3 to 5. 3 wolves simultaneously pounced on my left side. As I turned to deal with them, 2 more wolves on my right bit my hind leg. I painfully shook my hind leg free, but was knocked down by a wolf from the front. 4 or 5 wolves immediately piled on. Their sharp claws frantically tore at my armor. Although my armor was hard, couldn't withstand so many wolves attacking at once. Cracks began to appear. I struggled frantically and used the bone spikes on my back to pierce a wolf that was pinning me down. Seizing the moment the wolf pack recoiled, I rolled over, scrambled up, and lunged at the nearest wolf. My horns brutally stabbed into the wolf's chest. I flung it with force, slamming it directly onto a rock. However, before I could catch my breath, the lead wolf had already leaped down from the large rock, pouncing directly at my neck. I dodged sideways. The lead wolf's claws left 3 bloody gashes on my face. I roared in anger and spun around, fiercely kicking the lead wolf with my hind hoof. The lead wolf flipped in midair and landed, its movements terrifyingly agile. The other wolves seized the opportunity to surround me again. My stamina was rapidly depleting. Just then, a wolf bit my front leg. Another wolf pounced at my eyes. I desperately shook my head. My horns slashed across that wolf's belly. Its intestines spilled onto the ground. However, the wolf biting my front leg held on tightly. Its fangs had already pierced the armor and dug into my flesh. I was driven mad with pain. I violently lifted my front leg and slammed it hard onto the ground. That wolf's skull shattered from the impact. It finally let go. Ding. Killed a wild wolf. Gained 60 high energy points. Detected severe host injury. Recommend immediate energy replenishment. I panted heavily, looking at the 3 wolf corpses on the ground. I unhesitatingly lowered my head to feed. The warm flesh entered my mouth. A tingling sensation came from my wounds once more. The wolf pack saw me eating right in front of them. Fear and rage flashed in the eyes of the remaining wolves. The lead wolf howled again. The remaining wolf pack frantically pounced. This time, They were truly fighting to the death, completely disregarding their own safety. I was tackled by 7 or 8 wolves simultaneously. Sharp claws and fangs frantically tore and bit. My armor finally couldn't withstand it and began to shatter extensively. Blood gushed from the cracks. I felt my consciousness begin to blur. My body grew heavier and heavier. Am I going to die here? Just then, the system notification sound suddenly rang out. Detected host in critical condition. Activating emergency purification mode. Forcibly burning all energy within the body. Activating berserk state. The next second, all the blood in my body seemed to boil. A surge of unprecedented power erupted from deep within my body. I let out an earth-shattering roar and violently stood up. All the wolves pressing down on me were flung away. My eyes turned blood red. The bone spurs on my back grew wildly, changing from half a foot long to over a foot long. The cracks in my armor began to heal, and it became even thicker and heavier, gleaming with a metallic luster. I charged towards the nearest wolf, and with one hoof, I crushed its head. Another wolf pounced, but I gored it with my horn and violently slammed it against a rock. It died instantly. I was like a berserk beast. Wherever I went, wolves fell one after another. However, the next second, the Wolf King suddenly let out a long howl to the sky. The sound was shrill and piercing. Immediately after, its body began to swell, and the muscles beneath its fur bulged wildly. Its eyes became even bloodier, and its fangs doubled in length. Its entire body grew a full size larger. This beast could also go berserk. The Berserk Wolf King was even faster. Before I could react, it had already pounced in front of me. Its sharp claws aimed straight for my throat. I desperately turned my head, but the claws tore 3 bloody gashes on my neck. Stung by the pain, I retreated, but the Wolf King gave me no chance to catch my breath. Pouncing again, this time, it bit my front leg. Its fangs pierced through my armor, sinking deep into my flesh. I frantically shook my front leg, but couldn't shake it off. The Wolf King held on tightly, refusing to let go, and kept tearing with all its might, trying to bite off my leg. The intense pain made me almost unable to stand. I could feel my bones creaking. No, I had to find a way to get rid of it. I suddenly lifted my other front leg and slammed it hard onto the Wolf King's head. Once, twice, thrice. The Wolf King finally let go. Staggering back a few steps, I seized the opportunity to lower my head and fiercely stabbed the Wolf King with the remaining bone spurs on my back. The Wolf King tried to dodge, but due to the previous heavy blows, its movements were half a beat too slow. The bone spur pierced its shoulder. I pushed forward with all my might, and with a asterisk crunch asterisk, the Wolf King's shoulder blade was pierced. It let out a shrill scream, struggling desperately to escape. I held it firmly, pushing it step by step to the edge of the canyon. The Wolf King's hind legs were already dangling in the... If I pushed just a little harder, it would fall. However, just then, the Wolf King suddenly opened its mouth and bit my neck. It was trying to drag me down with it. Its fangs pierced through my armor and into my blood vessels. Warm blood gushed out. I felt my consciousness begin to blur, and my body grew heavier and heavier. No, I can't die here. I gritted my teeth and exerted force, fiercely goring the Wolf King with my horn. The Wolf King was sent flying, arcing through the air, and crashing heavily into the pile of rocks at the bottom of the canyon. I staggered back a few steps, almost falling down myself. I lay on the ground, panting heavily. The wound on my neck was still bleeding profusely. A system notification sounded. Ding. Killed the Wolf King. Gained 500 high energy points. Gained skill. Bloodthirsty Rage. Current weight has broken through 2,200 pounds. Strength has broken through 150 points. Agility has broken through 80 points. Body has begun deep evolution. Host, please replenish energy as soon as possible. I struggled to my feet and limped to the edge of the canyon. The Wolf King's corpse lay below. Although it was mangled and bloody from the fall, it was still edible. I carefully climbed down into the canyon, arriving beside the Wolf King's corpse. Even dead, this beast was still enormous. It must have weighed at least 600 or 700 pounds. I began to devour it without hesitation. As the warm flesh entered my mouth, that familiar burning sensation surged through my body once more. The wound on my neck began to heal, and the broken bone spurs were regrowing. I ate ravenously, and soon devoured most of the Wolf King's corpse. Devouring complete. Current weight, 2,420 pounds. Strength, 180. Constitution, 150. Agility, 90. Armor purified into heavy armor. Defense increased by 200%. Bone spurs purified into sharp blades. Bone spur penetration increased by 300%. I felt my entire body filled with power. The previous weakness was completely gone. I looked up and saw over a dozen wolves standing above the canyon. They looked at me, their eyes filled with awe and fear. I let out a low growl, and the pack of wolves immediately lay down. Trembling, from today onwards, this mountain forest is my domain. After devouring the Wolf King, I led the submissive wolf pack back into the depths of the forest. Over the next few days, I hunted the surrounding wild beasts relentlessly. My weight stabilized at 2,420 pounds. All the animals in the entire mountain forest sensed my aura and suppressed their presence. I had thought I could continue evolving peacefully, but I didn't expect humans to come knocking again. That day, I was drinking water in the west when I suddenly heard the roar of helicopters in the distance. I vigilantly raised my head and saw 3 helicopters flying towards me. I immediately turned and ran towards the depths of the forest. However, The helicopters were faster and quickly caught up. A huge metal net descended from the sky. I had no time to dodge and was caught squarely. The metal net was electrified. Powerful current instantly spread throughout my body. I convulsed with pain. My 4 legs gave way, and I crashed heavily to the ground. The helicopters landed. Jumping out from them were 7 or 8 fully armed men. The leader was a bald, muscular man with a stun baton and a tranquilizer gun hanging from his waist. He looked like a professional team leader. This is the mutated ox old Dao mentioned. A young team member walked over, his eyes full of shock. The bold captain nodded, pulled out his walkie-talkie and said, "Doctor Su, the target has been captured. Please give instructions." A woman's excited voice came from the walkie-talkie. "Excellent. Immediately transport him back to the research institute. I want to personally study his mutated genes." When I heard this, my heart sank. This group from the research institute specializes in capturing mutated creatures. The bald captain waved his hand, and several team members immediately took out tranquilizer guns, firing a barrage at me. The tranquilizer darts pierced my skin. The powerful drug made my consciousness begin to blur. I struggled desperately, but couldn't break free from the metal net. My body grew heavier and heavier. Just as I was about to lose consciousness, the system notification suddenly sounded. Ding, detected host injected with a large amount of anesthetic, forcibly metabolizing, estimated 3 hours until full consciousness. Advise host to feign unconsciousness and seek an escape opportunity. I immediately stopped struggling, closed my eyes, and feigned unconsciousness. The bald captain walked over and poked me with his stun baton. Only after confirming I was completely unconscious did he sigh in relief. Put him in the transport cage. Move quickly. Several team members worked together, lifting me into a huge titanium alloy cage. Then they used a hoist to hang it beneath the helicopter. The helicopter took off. Through my half-closed eyelids, I watched the mountain forest grow smaller and smaller. After flying for about an hour, the helicopter finally landed. I was transported into a huge underground base. All around me were researchers in white lab coats. A woman in her 30s walked over. It was Dr. Su, the one from the walkie-talkie earlier. She wore gold-rimmed glasses, and her eyes gleamed with fanaticism. "It's perfect. This is the most complete mutated specimen I've ever seen." Dr. Su walked around the cage once. From time to time, he took notes in a notebook. The captain transferred him to Lab No. 3. Prepare gold and silver for gathering herbs. The bold captain nodded. He commanded. The team members pushed the cage into a larger room. The room was filled with various instruments and equipment. In the center was a huge metal operating table. My heart began to race. These people were going to dissect me. Dr. Su walked to the side of the cage. He took out a syringe filled with green liquid and first injected a gene stabilizer to prevent him from going berserk during the experiment. As he spoke, he was about to open the cage. However, just then, I suddenly opened my eyes. The anesthetics effects had been almost entirely metabolized by the system. I could move now. I let out a furious roar and violently slammed into the cage door. Although the Tay gold cage was sturdy, it couldn't withstand my 2,200 jin weight and 180 points of strength. With a crunch, the cage door was deformed by my impact. Dr. Su was so startled, he stepped back a few paces. He shrieked, "He's awake! Quick! Use the electric baton." The bald captain reacted extremely quickly. He immediately raised his electric baton and charged. However, I had already burst out of the cage. I kicked him flying with a single hoof. He hit the wall and passed out. Other team members quickly pulled out tranquilizer guns and fired a volley of shots at me. The tranquilizer darts hit my heavy armor, but were all flattened. I charged at the nearest team member and tossed him flying with my horns. The entire laboratory descended into chaos. Researchers scattered in all directions. Dr. Su hid behind an instrument and, trembling, pressed the red button on the wall. A piercing alarm sounded. The laboratory doors automatically closed. Immediately after, over a dozen high-voltage electric nets dropped from the ceiling, trapping me in the center. The moment the electric nets were energized, powerful current once again coursed through my entire body. I convulsed in pain, but gritted my teeth and held on, refusing to fall. Dr. Su saw this scene. A hint of madness flashed in his eyes. Excellent. His electrical resistance is even stronger than anticipated. Such a specimen is simply priceless. As he spoke, he walked to a cabinet and took out several syringes filled with blue liquid. If ordinary tranquilizers don't work, then try this high-concentration gene enhancement agent. It's enough to put any creature into a deep sleep. He raised the syringe and walked towards me step by step. I struggled desperately, but was firmly trapped by the electric nets. I couldn't move against him at all. Just as the syringe was about to pierce my skin, I suddenly activated Bloodlust Frenzy. The moment Frenzy was activated, all the blood in my body boiled. My eyes turned blood red. My muscles swelled wildly. My strength surged to 300 points. I let out an earth-shattering roar and violently snapped the high-voltage electric nets. Sparks flew the moment the electric nets broke. All the lights in the entire laboratory flickered. Dr. Su's hand trembled in fright. The syringe fell to the ground. Blue liquid spilled everywhere. I charged at the nearest instrument and violently smashed it with my horns. Those priceless pieces of equipment were like paper in front of me, instantly turning into scrap. Stop him quickly. Don't let him destroy the equipment. Dr. Su shrieked. However, The remaining team members dared not approach me. I furiously destroyed everything in the laboratory. Cabinets, instruments, and operating tables were all smashed to pieces by me. Just then, I saw a huge freezer in the corner. It was filled with potions of various colors. I charged over and smashed the cabinet door with my head. Dozens of potions rolled out. There were red, blue, green, and purple ones. Doctor Su saw this scene. His face instantly turned ashen white. No, those are high-concentration gene agents. He absolutely cannot consume them. However, it was already too late. I lowered my head and picked up a purple potion. I bit through the glass tube and swallowed it whole. As the liquid entered my mouth, strong burning sensation shot from my throat straight to my forehead. Consumed high-concentration gene enhancement potion. Gained 800 high-energy points. Constitution surged by 50 points. Strength surged by 60 points. Agility surged by 40 points. I felt my entire body filled with power. The effect of this potion was even stronger than eating the Stone Wolf King. I unhesitatingly continued to consume the other potions. The red, blue, and green ones, I stuffed them all into my mouth. Doctor Su completely broke down. He knelt on the ground. His eyes were filled with despair. It's too late. All too late. Those potions are worth hundreds of millions. The research institute is going bankrupt. However, I paid him no mind. I continued to devour them frantically. Consumption complete. Current weight, 2,500 jin. Strength, 280. Constitution, 220. Agility, 150. Detected excessive energy within the host. Entering metamorphosis and dormant state. As soon as the words fell, I felt my eyelids growing heavier and heavier. My body began to lose control. No, these potions, there's a problem. I choked, trying to rush out of the laboratory, but found my legs too weak to exert any force. Asterisk thud exclamation asterisk. I fell heavily to the ground. My vision began to blur. Doctor Su saw this scene. Hope rekindled in his eyes. Quick, while he's unconscious, immediately inject him with tranquilizers and restrain him. The bold captain crawled up from the ground, holding his chest, and walked over. Several team members held tranquilizer guns and fired a volley of shots at me. However, the tranquilizer darts hit my body, but couldn't even pierce my skin. My heavy armor, under the effect of the potions, had become even harder, gleaming with a metallic luster. The bald captain gritted his teeth. He pulled out a walkie-talkie and said, "Send a transport vehicle over. Transfer him quickly while he's unconscious." 10 minutes later, a huge transport vehicle drove into the laboratory. Inside the compartment was a specially made titanium alloy cage. It was surrounded by high-voltage electric motors. The team members worked together to lift me into the cage. Then they used special restraints to lock my 4 legs. Doctor Zhu walked over. He reached out and touched my heavy armor. His eyes were filled with fanaticism. It's perfect. The hardness of this armor has already surpassed any known metal. If we can decipher his genetic code, human technology will make a huge leap. He turned and said to the bald captain, "Transport him to the special laboratory on the 3rd underground floor. It has the most advanced dissection equipment. I will personally study him." The transport vehicle started. I was transported deeper underground. The surroundings grew darker and darker. The air was filled with the pungent smell of disinfectant. I could feel that. My body was undergoing drastic changes. My bones were reorganizing. My muscles were growing, and my armor was evolving. The system's notification sound kept ringing in my mind. Ding, metamorphosis progress, 10%, 30%, 50%. Ultimate metamorphosis, expected to complete in 3 hours, evolving into an abyssal demonic ox. After metamorphosis is complete, the host will gain destructive power. Recommendation: escape immediately. The transport vehicle stopped. I was pushed into a huge laboratory. This place was more than 10 times larger than the previous laboratory. Terrifying instruments and equipment were everywhere. In the center was a huge metal operating table. It was covered with sharp scalpels and electric saws. Doctor Su walked in, followed by over a dozen researchers. He looked at me. Lying in the cage, an excited smile appeared on his face. "Prepare for dissection. I want to see his internal structure. What exactly is so special about it?" The researchers began preparing various tools. Electric saws, scalpels, and essence extractors were all laid out on the operating table. The bald captain walked over. He said, somewhat worriedly, "Doctor Su, that beast was so fierce just now. What if it wakes up?" Doctor Su smiled disdainfully. "Don't worry, the agent in its body is enough to keep it asleep for 3 days and 3 nights. Moreover, this cage is made of the strongest titanium alloy. Even a tank couldn't break it open." As he spoke, he walked to the side of the cage. He reached out and tapped the iron bars. "What's more, even if it wakes up, this is the 3rd basement level. There are 30 fully armed security personnel around. It won't be able to escape, even if it had wings." What he didn't know, however, was that my consciousness had actually been clear all along. The system was helping me accelerate my transformation. As long as I held on for another 2 hours, I would complete my evolution. By then, a mere titanium alloy cage wouldn't be able to hold me. I lay in the cage with my eyes closed, pretending to be unconscious. The system's notification sounds kept ringing in my mind. Ding. Transformation progress, 70%, 80%, I could feel it. Every bone in my body was growing, and my muscle density was rapidly increasing. Doctor? Su walked to the side of the cage. He took out a tablet and scanned me. Strange. Its body temperature is continuously rising. Its heart rate is also accelerating. This doesn't look like an unconscious state. He frowned, turned, and said to the bald captain, "Inject it with another anesthetic, just to be safe." The bald captain nodded. He picked up a huge syringe and walked over. Just as he was about to open the cage, the system's notification sound suddenly rang out. Transformation progress, 100%. Evolution complete. Current form, abyssal yak. Weight, 3,000 jin. Strength, 400. Constitution, 350. Agility, 200. New skills unlocked. Destruction, charge, hell stomp, fear roar. I suddenly opened a crimson light flickered in my eyes. The bald captain's hand trembled in fright. The syringe dropped to the ground. I let out a furious roar. Sound waves spread out as if substantial. The entire laboratory vibrated. Ding. Fear roar activated. All creatures within range enter a state of fear. Doctor, Su and the researchers all collapsed to the ground, their eyes filled with terror. Although the bald captain was a professional security guard, he was also scared pale, his legs going weak. I suddenly stood up. The restraints in front of me were like paper. They snapped instantly. I charged with force. The titanium alloy cage let out a piercing metallic screech. Asterisk crack. Crack dot asterisk. The iron bars began to deform. Cracks appeared one after another. Doctor? Su saw this scene. He completely broke down. Impossible. This is titanium alloy. How can it be broken open? However, reality slapped him hard in the face. I exerted force again. The cage completely shattered. Fragments flew everywhere. I walked out of the ruins, my whole body exuding terrifying pressure. At this moment, my body was a full size larger than before. My carapace turned deep black, emitting a dark, eerie sheen. The bone spurs on my back had become like sharp blades. Each one was 2 feet long, incredibly sharp. My hooves also became thicker and stronger, their tips gleaming with a cold light, as if they could pierce through anything. The bold captain struggled to stand up. He tremblingly pulled out his walkie-talkie. "All security personnel, immediately report to the 3rd basement laboratory. Target is rampaging. Repeat. Target is rampaging." As soon as he finished speaking, the laboratory door was smashed open. 30 fully armed security personnel rushed in. They carried submachine guns and rocket launchers. Leading them was a middle-aged man, the captain of the 8th squad. He was indeed the captain of the security team. He saw me. A trace of shock flashed in his eyes, but he quickly regained his composure. "Everyone, listen up. Open fire. You must kill the target." Bang, bang, bang. Dense bullets rained down, hitting my heavy carapace, but only sparking. My defense had increased several times after evolution. Ordinary bullets couldn't break through my defense at all. I charged towards the nearest security personnel. I activated destruction charge. Ding! Destruction charge activated. All obstacles in the charge path will be destroyed. I was like an out-of-control tank. Wherever I passed, people were sent flying. One security guard was sent flying by my collision. He slammed heavily into the wall and instantly fell unconscious. The 8th squad captain's expression changed. He immediately ordered the use of rocket launchers. 2 security personnel hoisted rocket launchers. They aimed at me and fired 2 rockets, which came whistling, trailing thick smoke. I, however, did not dodge. With 2 loud booms, the explosion's flames engulfed me. Doctor? Su saw this scene. A glimmer of hope flashed in his eyes. Is it dead? However, the next second, I walked out of the flames without even a scratch on me. The defense of my carapace was already strong enough to withstand rocket attacks. The 8th squad captain completely panicked. He had never seen such a terrifying creature. Retreat. Quick. Retreat. But it was already too late. I activated Hell Stomp. I suddenly raised my front hooves and stomped them heavily on the ground. With a loud boom, the entire laboratory violently shook. Cracks appeared on the ground. A shockwave spread out. A dozen security personnel were shaken off their feet and fell down one after another. I seized the opportunity to charge forward. I tossed one with my horns, stomped one with my hooves, and pierced one with my bone spurs. In just a few minutes, more than half of the 30 security personnel had fallen. The remaining people completely broke down. They threw down their weapons and turned to flee. The 8th squad captain also couldn't care about others. He desperately rushed towards the exit. However, how could I let him escape? I charged and blocked the doorway. The 8th squad captain looked at me before him. He closed his eyes in despair. I gored him with my horns and slammed him hard against the wall. He instantly fell unconscious. The entire laboratory was left with only Dr. Su and a few researchers. All of them were sprawled on the ground. Trembling, I walked step by step towards Dr. Su. My eyes were full of murderous intent. This woman wanted to dissect me. She almost took my life. Dr. Su looked at me. Tears streamed uncontrollably. "Please, let me go. I'll never dare again." I stared at him for a few seconds. Ultimately, I turned and walked towards the deeper parts of the laboratory. Killing him would be too easy. Let him live and watch his own research institute be destroyed. That is the greatest punishment. I rampaged through the laboratory, destroying everything. All instruments and equipment were smashed by me. Those precious experimental samples were also trampled to a pulp by me. Just then, I saw a huge glass cabinet in the corner. Inside were various mutated creatures. There were mutated snakes, mutated rats, and a mutated black bear. They saw me. Their eyes were filled with fear and longing. I walked over. I kicked the glass cabinet, shattering it with a hoof. The mutated creatures immediately rushed out, fleeing frantically. However, the mutated black bear did not run. Instead, it lowered its head, indicating submission to me. I looked at it. A trace of surprise flashed in my eyes. This beast, surprisingly, knew its place. The mutated black bear lay prone on the ground, its eyes filled with awe. I observed it. This beast was enormous. It weighed at least over 1,000 catties. Its body was a mass of bulging muscles. It seemed the research institute had injected it with a lot of agents. With a roar, the black bear immediately stood up and followed behind me. Since it was willing to submit, then I would keep it. It might come in handy later. I turned and looked towards the depths of the laboratory. There were many other rooms there, and I didn't know what they contained. I, with the black bear, wreaked havoc all the way, smashing open door after door. Finally, I arrived at a room in the deepest part. The door read, Core Energy Vault, no entry for unauthorized personnel. I kicked the door open with a hoof. The sight inside shocked me. The entire room was filled with massive cultivation tanks. Each tank contained energy of various colors. In crystal form, these crystals emitted intense energy fluctuations. Compared to the agents I had consumed before, they were countless times stronger. The system prompt sounded, ding. High-purity energy source detected. Host is advised to devour immediately. Upon devouring, you can break through current form limitations, evolve to a higher level. I rushed over without hesitation. I smashed the first cultivation tank with my horns. Blue energy crystals tumbled out. I swallowed them in one gulp. The crystals melted upon entering my mouth. A terrifying surge of energy erupted within my body. Ding! Devoured high-purity energy crystals. Gained 2,000 high energy points. Strength increased by 80 points. Constitution increased by 100 points. Agility increased by 60 points. I felt every cell in my body cheering. This feeling was more exhilarating than eating anything else. I frantically smashed the other cultivation tanks. Red, green, purple, and golden ones, all swallowed into my belly. The system prompts rang out frantically. Current weight, 3,500 catties. Strength, 580. Constitution, 550. Agility, 320. Host energy overload detected. Body beginning secondary evolution. My heavy armor began to crack. New armor grew out from the cracks. The color was darker, the hardness stronger. The bone spurs on my back were also growing. From 2 kai long, they became 3 kai. Each one shimmered with a dark red glow. My horns were even more exaggerated, directly growing to 5 kai, as thick as an adult's thigh, tapering to a sharp point, terrifyingly sharp. Just then, the laboratory's alarm blared loudly. Doctor, Sue's voice came over the loudspeaker, hysterically shouting, Activate self-destruct sequence. Since we can't keep him, then we'll perish together with him. No sooner had he spoken, the entire research institute began to shake. Red lights on the walls flashed madly. The countdown had begun. In 10 minutes, this place would be blown to ruins. My heart sank. I had to escape quickly. I turned and charged outwards. The black bear followed closely behind. However, just as I reached the laboratory entrance, I saw Squad 8, the captain, with the remaining security personnel, blocked the way. They held heavy machine guns. A few others carried flamethrowers. Squad 8 captain's face was ashen. His eyes were filled with grim determination. Doctor, Sue said that even if we die, we must hold you back and make sure you perish here. No sooner had he spoken, everyone opened fire simultaneously. A hail of bullets poured down like rain. Flamethrowers spewed scorching flames. I let out a furious roar, activating Fear Roar. However, this time the security personnel were clearly prepared. They wore special earplugs. The fear effect was greatly diminished. I could only charge head-on, pushing through the bullets and flames. Bullets struck my armor, although they couldn't penetrate my defense. The immense impact force still slowed me down. The flames made my skin burn hot. Though not fatal, it was very uncomfortable. I activated destructive charge, crashing into the crowd like a heavy tank. Several security personnel were sent flying by my impact, slamming hard against the wall, their fate unknown. However, Squad 8 captain did not flinch. He threw down his machine gun, pulled out a remote control, and yelled, Die. He pressed the button. Over a dozen massive iron cages descended from the ceiling, trapping me in the center. The moment the iron cages were electrified, powerful current once again coursed through my entire body. However, this time, my constitution had already reached 550 points. A mere electric current couldn't faze me at all. I roared and exerted force fiercely, forcibly tearing open the iron cages. Squad 8 captain saw this scene, and despair flashed in his eyes. Monster, you're a monster. I charged towards him. I kicked the remote control out of his hand with a hoof. However, I didn't kill him. Instead, I rushed directly towards the exit. Only 5 minutes remained on the countdown. I had to leave quickly. I, with the black bear, charged out of the laboratory, running frantically along the corridor. The institute structure was as complex as a maze, with forks and dead ends everywhere. I smashed open door after door, finally seeing an elevator leading to the surface. However, the elevator was out of service. I could only use the stairs. I burst into the stairwell, climbing upwards with all 4 limbs. The black bear followed closely behind. Panting heavily, only 3 minutes remained on the countdown. I sped up, finally reaching the first floor. However, the exit was sealed by a massive alloy door. Without a second thought, I activated destructive charge. With a thunderous boom, I smashed a large hole in the alloy door. I squeezed through, finding a wilderness outside. All around were forests. Only 1 minute remained on the countdown. I desperately ran into the distance. The black bear also sprinted along. 30 seconds, 20 seconds, 10 seconds. With an earth-shattering boom, the entire research institute was reduced to ruins in the explosion. The shockwave spread out like a tsunami. I was flung outwards and landed heavily on the ground. The black bear was also blown away, hitting a large tree and passing out. That area had already become a sea of fire. With thick smoke billowing, nothing could be seen clearly anymore. Dr. Sue, Squad 8 Captain, and those security personnel were probably all buried in the explosion. I panted heavily, covered in wounds, but my eyes gleamed with excitement. I had survived and become stronger. The system prompt sounded. Successfully escaped the Research Institute. Achievement Desperate Survival Unlocked. Current weight, 3,500 caddies. Strength, 580. Constitution, 550. Agility, 320. Reached peak state of abyssal yak. Host is advised to seek stronger opponents to break through limits. I looked towards the distant, continuous mountain range. A trace of longing flashed in my eyes. Human weapons could no longer harm me. Next, it was time to explore the depths of the wilderness. I carried the unconscious black bear, limping into the dense forest. My wounds were still bleeding, but the system was helping me recover quickly. After walking for about half an hour, the black bear finally woke up. It looked at me, its eyes filled with gratitude. It clearly knew that I had saved it. I let out a low roar, and he followed. Then I continued to move forward. The system suddenly reminded me. It detected ahead, 3 kilometers away. A large number of high-energy creatures were gathered, suggesting the host go hunt them. My eyes lit up. I immediately quickened my pace. The further I went, the stronger the smell of blood in the air became. Finally, I arrived at an open area. The sight before me shocked me. Animal carcasses were everywhere here. There were deer, wild boars, wolves, and even a few bears. And in the center of the pile of corpses stood 7 or 8 huge mutated creatures. Leading them was a mutated tiger. Its body was 3 times the size of a normal tiger. Its entire body was muscular and taut. Its eyeballs glowed green. Beside it were 2 mutated leopards, a mutated wild boar, and several mutated wolves. These beasts were clearly a gang, specializing in hunting in this area. The mutated tiger saw me, and a hint of wariness flashed in its eyes. It let out a low growl, and the other mutated creatures immediately spread out to form a circle around me. I flicked my tail, not afraid in the slightest. Although these beasts were formidable, they were no match for me. The mutated tiger was the first to attack. Its speed was extremely fast, like a bolt of lightning. It pounced at my throat. I dodged sideways and fiercely thrust my horns towards its abdomen. The tiger flipped in the air, barely avoiding a fatal blow, but a wound was still torn open on its ribs. After landing, it immediately retreated, a hint of apprehension flashing in its eyes. 2 mutated leopards seized the opportunity to pounce from the side, their sharp claws heading straight for my eyes. I spun around abruptly, meeting them with the bone spikes on my back. One leopard reacted too slowly and was impaled by the bone spikes. It died on the spot. The other leopard was so scared it immediately retreated. Daring not to approach again, the mutated wild boar charged from behind, its tusks fiercely thrusting towards my hind leg. I lifted my hind leg and savagely kicked it in the head. With a muffled thud, the wild boar's skull was shattered by the kick, and it fell to the ground, unable to get up. In just a few seconds, I had taken down 2 mutated creatures. The remaining mutated wolves saw this scene and trembled with fear. They dared not step forward at all. A hint of fury flashed in the mutated tiger's eyes. It let out a long roar to the sky, and its body began to swell. This beast could actually go berserk too. After going berserk, the mutated tiger's body grew even larger, and both its strength and speed surged. It pounced at me again. This time, it was so fast I could barely see it. Its sharp claws left 3 deep scratches on my armor, almost breaking through my defense. I recoiled a few steps in pain, a hint of solemnity flashing in my eyes. This beast had some real power. The mutated tiger, having gained the upper hand, showed no mercy. Attacking frantically, claws and fangs rained down like a storm. Although my armor was tough, it couldn't withstand its continuous assault and began to show cracks. I couldn't drag this out any longer. I had to finish this quickly. I fiercely activated Bloodlust Berserk, my eyes turning blood red. My strength surged to 800 points. I roared and activated Destructive Charge. The mutated tiger tried to dodge, but found my speed was even greater than its own. With a tremendous crash, I slammed violently into it. The mutated tiger was sent flying, crashing heavily into a large tree. The tree trunk was broken, I seized the chance to charge forward and fiercely plunged my horns into its chest. The mutated tiger let out a mournful shriek, struggling desperately, but unable to break free from my horns. I gave a mighty heave and slammed it directly onto the ground. The mutated tiger twitched a few times, then became completely still. The remaining mutated wolves saw that the tiger was dead and, terrified, turned and ran. However, how could I let them escape? I activated extreme speed and instantly caught up to them. In a breath's time, all the mutated wolves were killed by me. I stood panting amidst the pile of corpses, covered in blood. The black bear walked over, its eyes filled with awe. I began to devour the corpses of these mutated creatures. As the warm flesh entered my mouth, that familiar burning sensation surged through my body once more. Ding! Devouring complete. Current weight, 4,200 jin. Strength, 650. Constitution, 600. Agility, 380. Detected. Host has reached the limit of an abyssal yak. Cannot continue to evolve. Suggested. Host seek out and devour legendary creatures to break through racial limitations. Legendary creatures. What are those? The system did not reply. Instead, a scene appeared in my mind. It was a deeper wilderness, filled with towering ancient trees and mist. And deep within the mist, several colossal figures could vaguely be seen, exuding terrifying might. I looked at that scene, a hint of excitement flashing in my eyes. It seems the real challenge has just begun. Just then, the roar of helicopters suddenly came from afar. I looked up and saw 3 armed helicopters flying towards us. The Institute's logo was printed on their fuselages. It seems Dr. Su wasn't dead and had even called for reinforcements. The helicopter's loudspeaker blared, and Dr. Su's hysterical voice came through. Beast, you destroyed my research team and killed my people. Today, I'll make you pay the price. No sooner had he spoken than the machine guns on the helicopters began to strafe. Dense bullets rained down, kicking up clouds of dust from the ground. I immediately hid behind a large tree. The black bear also hid with me. However, the helicopter's firepower was too fierce. The large tree quickly became riddled with holes. I had to find a way to fight back. Otherwise, I would eventually be worn down and killed. Just then, I saw a huge rock not far away. I rushed out of cover, charging towards the rock. Enduring the bullets struck my armor, and though they couldn't break through my defense, the immense impact still slowed me down. I gritted my teeth and persevered, finally reaching the rock. I used my horns to push against the rock and exerted force fiercely. The rock, weighing several tons, was lifted by me. I aimed at the nearest helicopter and threw the rock with all my might. The massive rock flew towards the helicopter like a cannonball, its speed astonishing. The helicopter pilot had no time to react. The rock slammed violently into the fuselage. With a tremendous explosion, the helicopter exploded in midair, turning into a fireball. Its wreckage fell to the ground. The other 2 helicopters immediately ascended, daring not to approach again. Dr. Su's voice came from the loudspeaker, filled with terror and rage. Blast him with missiles. No sooner had he spoken than the 2 helicopters simultaneously launched missiles. 4 missiles, trailing long plumes, whistled towards me. Their target was my exact location. I immediately activated extreme speed, desperately dodging to the side. Boom, 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 boom. 4 tremendous explosions. The fiery blast engulfed the spot where I had just stood. An area of several tens of meters was turned into rubble. I hid behind a large boulder, covered in dust but unharmed. However, the helicopters did not stop their attack. The helicopter did not stop attacking. 64 missiles flew up. I gritted my teeth. This can't go on. I must find a way to shoot them down. I looked at the black bear beside me. A thought flashed in my eyes. I let out a low roar, signaling the black bear to climb onto my back. Although the black bear didn't understand what I was going to do, it still did as I said. I carried the black bear and rushed out of cover, heading straight for the nearest towering tree. The helicopter's machine guns immediately swept. Bullets struck my body. Fire, sparks flew like arrows. I pushed through the bullets and rushed under the big tree. I fiercely activated Hell's Stomp. With a tremendous boom, the big tree violently shook. Its roots began to loosen. I used my horns to ram the tree trunk, exerting force fiercely. Crack, crack, the tree roots snapped. The entire big tree began to topple over. In the direction it toppled was precisely one of the helicopters. The helicopter pilot realized something was wrong. He desperately tried to dodge, but it was already too late. The big tree slammed heavily onto the helicopter. The propeller got jammed by branches. The helicopter lost control and plummeted. With a crash, the helicopter hit the ground and exploded, flames shooting skyward. Dr. Su was clearly terrified. His voice came through the radio, crying, "Retreat, retreat quickly. This beast simply cannot be killed." The last helicopter immediately turned, trying to escape. However, how could I let it get away? I dragged the black bear and charged towards another big tree. Repeating the same method, I knocked down another big tree. The big tree fell in the direction of the helicopter. However, This time the helicopter reacted faster. It successfully dodged. My heart sank. Was I going to let it escape? Just then, the black bear suddenly leaped from my back. It grabbed a branch in midair. It used the momentum to jump, and surprisingly jumped onto the helicopter's landing gear. The black bear's weight was only over 1,000 catties. The helicopter immediately lost balance. It began to sway. The pilot desperately tried to stabilize it. However, the black bear had already climbed onto the outside of the cockpit. It fiercely slapped the glass with its claws. The glass shattered. The black bear slapped the pilot's face with a claw. The pilot screamed in agony. His hand loosened, and the helicopter completely lost control. With a boom, the helicopter crashed to the ground. The flames of the explosion once again shot skyward. The black bear jumped down during the crash. Although it had a pretty bad fall, it was unharmed. I walked over and nudged it with my nose. It was a form of praise. Although this beast wasn't very strong, its mind was quite sharp. Ding! Destroyed armed helicopter. Gained 500 high energy points. Successfully repelled. Human armed pursuit. Achieved public enemy of humanity achievement. I looked at the wreckage of the 3 helicopters. A hint of coldness flashed in my eyes. Although human weapons were powerful, they were nothing more than this in the face of absolute power. Just then, the roar of an engine came from afar again. I raised my head. I saw a huge armored vehicle driving towards us. On the roof of the armored vehicle, a huge cannon was mounted. A dark, gaping muzzle was aimed at me. The car door opened. Captain Ba Lion walked out from inside. He was covered in bandages. He had clearly been severely wounded in the explosion, but he had survived. He looked at me. His eyes were filled with hatred. "Beast, you killed so many of my brothers. Today, I will avenge them," he said. Pressing the remote control, the autocannon on the armored vehicle immediately opened fire. Boom, boom, boom. Shells rained down like raindrops. Each one possessed immense power. I desperately dodged. However, the shell's coverage was too wide. I couldn't dodge them at all. Several shells exploded around me. The massive shockwave sent me flying. I crashed heavily to the ground. Several cracks appeared on my armor. This armored vehicle's firepower was even fiercer than the helicopters. I struggled to get up. A fierce glint flashed in my eyes. Since I couldn't dodge, I would face it head-on. I activated Bloodlust Frenzy. My eyes turned blood red. My strength surged to 900 points. I let out a furious roar. I activated Destructive Charge, heading straight for the armored vehicle. Captain Ba Lion saw me charging. His expression changed. He immediately ordered to increase firepower. The autocannon fired frantically. Shells poured down like a torrential rain. I pushed forward through the shelling. The cracks on my armor grew more numerous. Blood seeped from the cracks. However, I didn't stop. Instead, I charged faster and faster. 100 meters. 50 meters, 30 meters. Captain Ba Lion finally panicked. He turned, wanting to escape into the armored vehicle, but it was already too late. I slammed heavily into the armored vehicle. The terrifying impact directly flipped the armored vehicle over. The armored vehicle tumbled several times in the air. It crashed heavily to the ground. The vehicle body was severely deformed. Captain Ba Lion was thrown out and fell to the ground. He was covered in blood. I walked up to him, looking down at him. He looked at me. His eyes were filled with fear and despair. "Monster. You're a monster." I raised my front hoof and stomped fiercely on the armored vehicle. Crack, crack. The armored vehicle was crushed to smithereens by my stomp. The ammunition inside began to detonate. With a tremendous explosion, the armored vehicle completely exploded into scrap metal. Captain Ba Lion was sent flying by the shockwave of the explosion. His fate unknown. I stood in the ruins, breathing heavily. My body was covered in wounds, but my eyes gleamed with excitement. Human armed forces could no longer stop me. The system notification sounded. Successfully destroyed heavy armored vehicle. Gained 800 high energy points. Current weight, 4,500 catties. Strength, 700. Constitution, 650. Agility, 400. Host has become the strongest entity in this area. Suggested to proceed to the deeper wilderness to search for legendary creatures. I looked towards the distant, continuous mountain range. Mist swirled there. I could vaguely feel a terrifying aura. It was time to go and see. I left the battlefield with the black bear, heading deeper into the wilderness. The wounds on my body, with the help of the system, rapidly healed. The cracks on my armor were also being repaired. After walking for about 3 hours, the surrounding environment became increasingly desolate. The trees also became sparser. I suddenly stopped because a familiar place appeared ahead. It was the strong man's cattle farm from before. I hesitated for a moment, but still decided to go and take a look. The cattle farm was already dilapidated. Weeds were everywhere. The cattle pens were empty. I walked to the cattle pen where I was once kept. The dry hay was still inside, but it had already gone moldy. Just then, I heard a little girl's voice from afar. "Daddy, look, there's a really big ox there." I turned around. I saw the strong man, holding Duoduo's hand, standing at the cattle farm's entrance. The strong man froze when he saw me. His face instantly turned ashen. He recognized me. Duoduo, however, wasn't scared. Instead, she excitedly ran. "Such a big ox. It's much bigger than Little Black." The strong man was scared out of his wits. He immediately rushed over and pulled Duoduo back. "Duoduo, don't go over there. That's not an ordinary ox. That is That is, he couldn't continue speaking, because he saw me staring at them. I slowly walked towards them. The burly man was so scared, he collapsed to the ground. He shielded Duoduo behind him, begging, "Please, spare my daughter. If you want to kill me." His voice trembled. His eyes were filled with fear. I walked in front of them. I lowered my head and looked at Duoduo. The little girl looked at me with wide eyes. There was no fear in her eyes. Instead, there was some curiosity. New, are you little high? How did you get so big?" She reached out her small hand, wanting to touch my nose. The burly man, startled, immediately pulled her hand back, fearing I would harm her. I looked at Duoduo. In my mind, I saw her crying and begging the burly man then. The scene of her begging him not to kill me. Although the burly man eventually sold me, at least Duoduo was genuinely kind to me. I gently nudged Duoduo's hand with my nose, then turned and left. The burly man was stunned. He hadn't expected me to let them go. "Little Hai, is that really you?" he asked. Trembling, I didn't look back. I continued walking forward with the black bear. Let bygones be bygones. I was no longer the defenseless calf that could be slaughtered at will. After leaving the sheep and cattle farm, I quickened my pace. A system notification sound rang out, detecting a powerful energy fluctuation ahead, 10 kilometers away. Suspected legendary creature. My eyes lit up. I immediately galloped towards that direction. The further I went, the stronger the oppressive feeling in the air became. The black bear began to tremble, clearly sensing danger. I told him to stay put and wait for me. Then I walked forward alone. Finally, I arrived at an open area. Not a blade of grass grew here. The ground was covered in scorched marks. The air was filled with the smell of sulfur. And in the center of the open area lay a massive creature. It was a terrifyingly huge python. Its body was at least 30 meters long, as thick as a water barrel. Its entire body was covered in pitch-black scales. Its head was as big as a small car. Its eyes were closed, seemingly in deep sleep. A system notification sound rang out, detecting legendary creature. Abyssal giant python. Combat power assessed as extremely dangerous. Host is advised to proceed with caution. This creature possesses destructive power. I stared at the giant python. My heart began to pound faster. The oppressive aura emanating from this beast was stronger than any creature I had encountered before. However, I did not flinch. Instead, a glint of excitement flashed in my eyes. Only by devouring it could I break through my limits and evolve to a higher level. I took a deep breath, slowly approaching the giant python. However, just as I took a few steps, the python suddenly opened its eyes. They were a pair of blood-red eyes, filled with coldness and malevolence. It stared at me, emitting a low hissing sound from its mouth. The next second, it violently raised its head and opened its gaping maw, lunging to bite me. I immediately dodged. The python's fangs bit into the ground, leaving 2 deep pits. I seized the opportunity to charge forward, stabbing its body with my horns. However, my horns struck its scales, only leaving a shallow scratch. This beast's defense was even stronger than my armor. The giant python's tail whipped around violently, like a massive iron whip. It lashed fiercely at me. I was sent flying and crashed heavily onto the ground. Several cracks appeared on my armor. What immense power! I struggled to get up, activating unleashed rage. My eyes turned blood red. My strength surged to 1,000 points. I let out a roar and charged at the giant python again. This time, my speed was faster. My strength was greater. I activated destructive charge and slammed fiercely into the giant python's body. The giant python's body swayed from the impact. Several cracks appeared on its scales. However, it immediately counterattacked, opening its mouth and spewing a stream of black venom. The venom landed on the ground and immediately corroded large pits into the earth. I desperately dodged, but was still splattered by some. The venom landed on my armor, emitting a sizzling sound. My armor began to corrode. I felt a stinging pain on my skin. The power of this venom was terrifying. The giant python seized the opportunity to coil around my body. Its immense strength began to tighten. I felt my bones creaking. Breathing became increasingly difficult. No, if this continues, I'll be choked to death. I struggled desperately, using the bone spikes on my back to stab the giant python's body. The bone spikes pierced through its scales and embedded themselves into the giant python's flesh. The giant python, in pain, loosened its grip slightly. I seized the chance to break free. I gasped for breath. My entire body was covered in wounds. My armor was covered in cracks and corrosive marks. However, I did not retreat. Instead, the fighting spirit in my eyes grew even fiercer. I activated Infernal Stomp and stomped fiercely on the ground. With a thunderous boom, the ground shook violently. The giant python's body also swayed. I seized the opportunity to charge forward and fiercely stabbed my horns into the giant python's vital spot. This time, my horns finally pierced through its scales, deeply embedding themselves into the giant python's body. The giant python let out a mournful hiss. Struggling desperately, its tail lashed fiercely at me. I was sent flying, crashing into a huge rock. The rock shattered from the impact. I fell to the ground, feeling like all the bones in my body were about to fall apart. However, I gritted my teeth and got up, charging at the giant python once more. In this battle, Either it dies or I die. The giant python and I fought wildly in the open area. Every clash shook the earth. The giant python's vital spot was injured by my attack. Its movements clearly slowed down, but its counterattacks were still fierce. It spewed venom again. I desperately dodged, but my hind leg was still splattered. A large hole was corroded into my armor. Intense pain surged through me. I almost couldn't stand. However, I gritted my teeth and persevered, charging in front of the giant python, and fiercely stabbed my horns towards its eyes. The giant python let out a shriek, violently whipping its head. My horns missed their mark, only scratching its eyelid. It angrily opened its gaping maw and lunged to bite me. I had no time to dodge. I could only meet it with the bone spikes on my back. The bone spikes pierced into its mouth. It cried out in pain and loosened its mouth. I seized the opportunity to activate destructive charge and slammed fiercely into its head. With a crack sound, cracks appeared on the giant python's skull. Its body twitched violently. I didn't give it a chance to breathe. I charged forward again, stabbing my horns into its throat. This time, my horns plunged deep. Fresh blood gushed out like a spring. The giant python let out its final hiss. Its body twitched a few times and finally became still. Killed legendary creature. Abyssal giant python. Gained 5,000 high energy points. Weight broke through 5,000 caddies. Strength broke through 800 points. Constitution broke through 700 points. Agility broke through 450 points. Broke through racial limits. Activate ultimate evolution. I lay panting on the ground, covered in wounds, barely able to stand. However, the system's prompt forced me to struggle to my feet and begin devouring the giant python's corpse. As the python's flesh entered my mouth, an unprecedented surge of energy erupted within me. I felt every cell in my body, cheering, frantically absorbing this energy. Devouring in progress. 10%, 30%, 50%. My armor began to shed. A new armor grew from beneath my skin. It was darker in color, harder, and gleamed with a metallic luster. The bone spurs on my back were also growing, from 3 feet long to 5 feet. Each one shimmered with a dark golden light. My horns were even more exaggerated, growing directly to 7 feet, as thick as a water bucket, with terrifyingly sharp tips, as if they could pierce heaven and earth. My body size was also expanding, surging from 5,000 caddies to 6,000 caddies. My entire body was a mass of bulging muscles, brimming with explosive power. Devouring complete. Current weight, 6,000 caddies. Strength, 1,000. Constitution, 900. Agility, 500. Purification, complete. Current form, Wilderness Overlord. Ultimate skills unlocked. Destructive Stomp. Overlord's aura. Undying body. I stood up, feeling my body brimming with power, as if I could tear everything apart. I let out a long roar to the sky, my voice echoing like thunder across the entire wilderness. Within a radius of dozens of kilometers, animals heard my roar and promptly cowered on the ground. Trembling, the black bear ran over from afar, and seeing my appearance, its eyes were filled with awe and fear. It lay on the ground, not daring to look up at me. I let out a low growl, signaling it to get up. Only then did the black bear shakily stand up and follow behind me. I turned and looked at the distant mountain range, the deepest part of the wilderness, and the most dangerous place in legends. However, the current me no longer feared any challenge. I led the black bear, walking step by step into the depths of the wilderness. Wherever I passed, all beasts retreated. No creature dared to approach me. I ascended the highest peak in the wilderness, standing on the cliff's edge, gazing down at the land below. The distant cattle farm was no longer visible. That had once been my cage. Now, the entire wilderness was my territory. I roared to the sky once more, my voice shaking the mountains and forests. Deep within the forests, countless roars of wild beasts erupted, as if responding to my call. Wolf packs, bear packs, tiger packs, and even those mutated creatures all knelt towards the mountain peak. They were submitting to the heart of this wilderness. I looked at the myriad beasts below me, a hint of satisfaction flashing in my eyes. From a mere cattle, destined for slaughter, to the current wilderness overlord, I had taken less than half a year. I had completely broken free from humanity's shackles. Human weapons were nothing but toys before me. From today, this wilderness was my domain. The system's prompt sounded one last time. Congratulations, host, for completing the ultimate purification and becoming the wilderness overlord. A new journey is about to begin. A vaster world awaits the host to explore. I looked into the distance. There were higher mountains, deeper forests, and stronger opponents. I knew this was just the beginning. I let out one final roar, its sound reverberating throughout the entire wilderness. Myriad beasts roared in unison. The mountains and forests trembled. From today onwards, I was the supreme beast king of this land. No humans, no shackles, no restraints, only the endless wilderness and the ceaseless path of evolution. I turned and looked further into the distance. Mist swirled there, and I could vaguely discern an even vaster world. Perhaps even stronger beings awaited me there. But I was not afraid, for I was the wilderness overlord, the yak that devours all. My journey had only just begun. The black bear followed behind me, and together we walked into the depths of the wilderness, towards the unknown distance. Behind us, the roars of myriad beasts echoed endlessly, as if bidding farewell to their king. But I did not look back, walking step by step towards a stronger future.